Hello, I'm Lynda from Scallywag Astrology.
And I'm Donna from Donna B Astrology.
And this is Astro Babble, where we babble about astrology. And today we're talking about the astrological houses. These are the houses that are the different areas of your life. We look at different houses to tell what's going on in different areas of your life. And we're also going to go through the Sibley Chart, which is the US chart. It's like a natal chart for the US. And Donna has done an article about Saturn through the houses of the Sibley chart, and it was very interesting. So we've decided to put it on the podcast.
Yes, it was very interesting. It's an easy way to learn. Our purpose, as always, is to get the astrology conversation going more. And if you guys know where the houses are and what they do and what they represent and how they'll show up in your life, it's an easier way to learn your natal chart. And going through what a lot of Americans know is their history helps everybody to be able to understand what the houses do and how they signify in a life or the life of America. So it should be fun. It's an interesting way to learn a little bit of history and astrology. You're pulling up the chart for right now, so we can see where Pluto is today as we're recording. Pluto is going to be at the exact same spot as it was on the day we signed the Declaration of Independence. Well, not
so that must be
Americans did.
Well, yeah. So it must be about 248 years then, because Pluto takes about 248, 250 years to go all the way around a natal chart.
Right. So we didn't know Pluto was sitting there at 27 degrees Capricorn when we signed the declaration, but it did, and it was there. And that's what kind of inspired me to write that article, because if we know how the Saturn is all about structure and foundation, and if we knew how it was built, then it's easier to understand where the houses are represented through the Sibley chart. This is a Sibley, well, we will be looking at the Sibley chart.
Yeah, we'll look at the Sibley chart soon. That will be very interesting. For most people, well, if you can see the screen, a horoscope or an astrology chart is split into 12 like slices, and each house or each slice is kind of looks after a different part of your life. So at the 9 o'clock position, we have the first house. And when we when people talk about the ascendant or your rising sign, it's usually the start of the first house, or if you're like Donna and me and you use whole sign houses, it will be floating inside the first house.
Yeah.
And the first house is how we dawn on others, as Stephen Forrest says. He's a very famous astrologer. I always like that, how we dawn on others, how we others see us, because the ascendant is determined by the sign and degree coming up over the horizon at the time, date, and place of your birth. And it can also refer to your vitality, your appearance, and yeah, your kind of personality. Some people call it a mask that you put on in front of others.
Yeah.
And if you're somebody that has a very different ascendant to your sun sign or your moon sign, sometimes it can be, you can seem like different person to different people.
And the first house starts right there at the 9 o'clock position. I like Bernadette Brady, and she says at that moment is when life meets matter. That's where you take your first breath in a natal chart, or exactly when a city gets started, right at that ascendant.
Yeah. Yeah, some cities we're very lucky to know. I think Baghdad's one. I think they actually erected a chart for when they would actually I can't even say it, proclaim Baghdad. So it's pretty interesting.
It was, I think Masha Allah did, I think he elected that when the city was going to be started.
I believe so, yes.
And you base that on strength and the benefic planets and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Donna knows all about electional astrology, and sometime in the future we'll do a podcast about that. Like how, you know, if you've got an important event coming up, say a wedding or, you know, a meeting, and you want it to go well, you can elect it to have the best possible outcome.
Or launching a website or a business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or maybe even, you know, if you have some choice in, if you know that you're having a cesarean, if you have some choice in time or date. I'm sure it's done. Actually, I believe there was Princess Eugenie or Beatrice. She was born on like the 8th of the 8th, 88 or something. And I believe there was some talk that, yeah, that was possibly she was induced to be born on such an auspicious date.
Yeah, it's called the Lion's Gate. 88. It's called the Lion's Gate. It's supposed to be fierce. So yeah. So that's the first house. The second house has everything to do with your money, what it takes to survive. So your assets would be shown in using the second house.
And your income, your possessions, and your resources, which can also be not just finances and possessions, but things that are useful. I've heard people say that even assistance, and I've heard people talk about food, because, you know, we actually need food, otherwise we die. So, you know, it's what nurtures,
survive.
What nourishes us, I suppose.
Yeah.
And then we have the third house. Yeah. This is the house of siblings, and it's also our local area, local neighborhood. It's sometimes family, like cousins and that. It's, you know, close to the fourth house, which is home, short distance travel, and just communications. You know, if you've got something going on in your third house, you might be doing a lot of running around. Like if you've got Mars in your third house, the tempo of your day-to-day life might pick up quite dramatically, or, you know, you might be getting into arguments with siblings or your neighbors.
Yeah. It has to do with anything that's, if you can easily go there for the afternoon and run an errand, that's where the third house type of stuff is. It's like the short communication, short trips. So it's, you know, like the grocery store, the bank, the places in your community that you are very familiar with. We're not talking about anything where you have to, you know, pack a lunch and find overnight staying somewhere else. We're talking about the city that you are in, that you live in, and where you do your errands. So that's all represented in the third house.
And if you were somebody who like travels across country, but you're doing it several times a week, that wouldn't necessarily be long distance. For some people, if they do that once every couple of years, that would be long distance. But it's that happening often, that this is your general kind of routine, then that for somebody like that would be kind of a third house thing.
Right. It's what you're familiar with. Yeah.
Yes.
I travel from one side of the state to the other all the time in the warmer weather. And yeah, it's I would consider over here where my home is just as familiar as, you know, on the other side where, you know, the beach is at. Yeah. So I would find those both very familiar because I'm in both spots.
Yeah.
50% of the time.
Yeah.
So the fourth house is where your lineage comes from. I've done some stonework with lineage, but beyond that, we're talking astrology. it's where the father comes from, or the fatherland, or your ancestors. If you're talking about your grandmother's whatever, it might be in the fourth house. The things that you, where you come from is as well the fourth house. It is also, if you're talking about you know, things that might happen to your house. If Venus is in your house, you might be getting your house painted at that time. You know, if
Yeah.
you, when you go to look at stuff from when you've done improvement projects, you'll see that Venus very well might be aspecting that fourth house.
Oh, exactly, exactly. And yeah, our home, our living situation, and real estate matters. So there's that whole home, and on a deeper level, family, parents, and
Land.
homeland, as you were saying. Then we've got the fun house, the fifth house. This is children, creativity, fun activities, hobbies, sport, recreation, gambling, romance, sex, all the good stuff.
Yeah, the things that we do for pleasure.
Yeah, it's a
Children
fun house.
are in there, as well as arts. The arts are in there.
Yes, yes. It's the Venus is in her joy in this house. And actually, while I think of it, we'll go back very briefly. Mercury is in its joy in the first house. So, and then we've got a so fun house, the sixth.
After the fun, sometimes if you haven't been paying attention, the sixth house will come in and climb up on you after you've been having too much fun. The sixth house has everything to do with illness or your pets. So if you weren't taking care of your pets, they might have made your house a mess. Yeah, the sixth house has it has a lot to do with illness. It also has a lot to do with people that you are in charge of.
Yeah, so that could be employees. Traditionally, it was the house of slaves, but today it would be employees. Some people also see it as a house of service. So if you were being of service to somebody, or, you know, if you're in a job where you feel like you're very hardly done by, and that, you know, your boss is a real taskmaster, and this is really 10th house is our jobs, but sometimes if you're feeling really overwhelmed and overworked, sometimes the sixth can be appropriate for that. Daily routines as well. This is the joy of Mars. Mars is one of the malefics. It likes to cause a bit of trouble, so it's not surprising finds its joy in the sixth house.
And then onto the seventh house, that is the house of the other, the house of the one-on-one relationships, or if you have like a group of people and a group of another people, like a school team, like a basketball team. If the school team is on the house represented in house one, the players on the other team would be represented by the house in the seventh house. Those are open enemies. Those are people that you know that you're opposing, that you have to get along with, or you should get along with, you need to get along with. That would be up to your husband. Your spouse is also represented in that house. Somebody you should be getting along with, but that you have a relationship that is a one-on-one relationship. That's where the seventh house comes in.
Yeah, a lot of people look at it as the house of marriage, and that the sign on the descendant can be indicative of a marriage partner. But it's also, you know, business partners, and it's also very good friends. We have friends in the 11th house, but really good, those close one-on-one relationships are 7th house.
Right. Your doctor would be represented in the 7th house.
Yeah.
Because it's that one-on-one relationship.
Yeah.
Right. And then the 8th house is all about other people's money, wills, trusts. How I look at it if you were to look at the bottom half of this circle, and the first house is the other person, go to the first house is you, the seventh house is the other person. So if the second house is your finances, the third person, the eighth house would be the other person's finances. It goes on and it goes, it's like the one step up from what we went through the first time. Now we're including the other people on the top half of the chart. So in the eighth house is other people's money. It would be trusts. It would be your wills. It's also known as the house of transformation. It has to do with other people's money, their trust, transformations. But as well, I want to say the eighth house has I'm I'm drawing a blanket at what I want to say.
It's other people's money, which can include things like taxation and insurances and loans and debts. It can be, as this seventh house is the relationship, the eighth house is the second from the seventh. So it's the finances and resources of the relationship. Inheritances, because this is also a house that's associated with death.
And then the ninth house,
one of the more feared houses.
It is a feared house. It's a feared house, but you almost need to go through that in order to get that transformation that's needed. And I don't think a lot of people really get that. You can't grow if you're not changing, and transforming is changing. So it's all part of growth. The ninth house has got to do with the higher education. The third house is for early learning. The ninth house is for the higher education. It has to do with philosophy. It has to do with higher education. It has to do with astrology. You'll get your clerical people who have, if you have Saturn in there, I would suspect a lot of people are working very closely with the church or higher education and that type of thing.
It's other cultures, beliefs, religion.
And it's also the far away.
Long distance travel, foreigners, and things like astrology, tarot, your esoteric subjects. So and the sun is actually in its joy there.
Yes.
And then we have the 10th house, which is all about what's visible. It's what you're known for. It's often related to career or public reputation. So, fame we would expect to see here, but also infamy. You've got your Jesse James and your Billy the Kid types and whoever else. It's sometimes authority, parents, and also bosses. And it could be authority in general, though the ninth house is the law. But 10th house can be authority. So, but generally when we're talking about it, we're talking about career matters.
Or what you're known for as well, which is, where else would that be but on the top of the chart? It's what you're known for.
Exactly.
That's exactly why it's there. Those houses at the top and the exact bottom, the exact one side and the other side, those are at the angles, and they're very important houses.
The 10th is a very visible house, whereas the 4th of the home and the family, it's a lot more hidden, even though it's an angular house, because the 1st, 7th, 4th, and 10th are what we call angular houses.
Right. And so if you have everything in the 4th house of what at home, then you have the opposite, your work life, and that's more public. So that is why that's why there's that opposition there. You've got your home and work, and you see that opposition.
And, that's why, an opposition does by its nature imply that there's a difficulty. You need to be able to balance that. And, it's the natural, a lot of people have issues with this, balancing home and work, or in the case of first and seventh, autonomy and doing what I want, as opposed to, being diplomatic and agreeable and having a nice relationship.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that is so right. That is so right. It is a dynamic that's kind of already put in place for you at the time you're born. It's you've got all those oppositions that are ready, you can call them oppositions or you can call them balance, but they do tend to balance each other. Speaking of balance and a balanced life, you would want to go into your 11th house opposite the house of children and friends, or children, is you have in the 11th house up in Pisces, as this is showing, is your house of friends. It's also your hopes and your dreams. It's your groups, and it's everybody. It's the collective. It's everybody in the world. It's other people's, it could be other people's children. If those are your children, it could be, if you're in a second relationship, it could be your potential spouse's other, children.
Yeah.
It could as well.
Because
yeah. Go ahead.
You take from the 7th house and count to 5, that's their child. Yeah. What we going to say? Oh, yeah. So, and I've also heard it said that, the 5th house is what we do for our pleasure, for ourselves. And the 11th house is pleasures that we share with others. So that's friends, groups, organizations. Though there's the hopes and dreams for ourselves. You think that would be kind of 5th house, but that's 11th. Maybe it's just, I don't know why. But yeah.
Your friends have to show up someplace.
Yeah, maybe you need to put it out into the world. Maybe you need other people. Jupiter is in its joy here, which makes a lot of sense. It's a very gregarious sign. So
yes, very expansive.
Donna knows all about Jupiter in the 11th.
Yeah, I do. I do have Jupiter in the 11th. It's a nice place to have Jupiter. Yep. And then moving on to the 12th house, that is the house of isolation, self-undoing. It's also the house of finishing up things. So as we go around from the 1st house and we go all the way around the chart, we are finishing up things. So we're tidying it up and we're moving on to the next phase of whatever our life has in store for us. And so the 12th house is the endings house.
This is sometimes associated with addictions or hidden things, secret and hidden things. And this can include secret or hidden illnesses. And what they mean by that is not that, you're keeping it hidden from somebody, though maybe centuries ago you might have, but things like, I suppose, you see it on Facebook and that people talk about these diseases that you look fine, but nobody can tell that you're in agony.
Right.
And that would be a 12th house matter. I mean, it's still 6th house, and illness, mental illness or mental health
Depression.
issues would be a 12th house matter most times.
Depression shows up a lot in the 12th house.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes when you've got the sun or Mars going through that house, it tends to kind of make you really tired. It's kind of just saps your energy. So that's the normal chart. That's kind of what you can expect in a normal natal chart. But now we're going to have a look at the Sibley chart. And it's called the Sibley chart because of doctor and astrologer in England, actually, who set the time for it. But
Ebenezer Sibley, right?
That's it. Yep. There's a little bit of contention with some people about which chart to use for the United States, but this one is very well regarded by a lot of people, and it's what we're using. And oh, actually, I'll leave this here first off because today is the 22nd of Feb. And if you've been listening to any astrology podcast or reading astrology articles, you might have heard about the return of Pluto. So you can see here, actually, let me get an annotate. You can see Pluto here is in the same place it was in the birth chart at 27 degrees, though it's direct this time because this red here means that it was retrograde at the time of the Sibley chart, which was the 4th of July, 1776. They've set it for 5:10 p.m. I'm not sure why that time exactly. Philadelphia, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, Saturn in the 12th.
Okay. When we originally signed the Declaration of Independence, that Saturn would have been positioned right on Saturn in the 11th house of our hopes and dreams. In the 12th house, we're going through all of the
birth pain,
all of the turmoil of the war. The Revolutionary War it wasn't just a couple of days, it was many years that we were fighting it. So Saturn is in a house for 2 years, about 2.5 years. So it started out in the 11th house. It's now in the 12th house, right around, we have it for 1779. So we're in the throes of the Revolutionary War, and it's hard, and people aren't getting the stuff that they normally get. Their families are dying, and it's hard. It's kind of self-undoing. Not that it isn't for a higher purpose, but it did alienate us from England and what we were normally using for trade and for goods, and we had to figure out how to do all that stuff by ourselves. So it was a little bit of isolation, a little bit of self-undoing, but that was the period of time that we were in when Saturn was in the 12th house.
Yeah, I was just thinking too, the 12th house is the house of exile as well, and you kind of exiled yourself from the UK really in some forms. Well, quite dramatically, but
with John Hancock flair.
And this is the 12th house, and where it is, this is the Benedict Arnold. Yeah. Yeah, so he's known as a very famous traitor.
Yes. The fort you were telling me earlier was called the Fort Arnold, or some kind of establishment or settlement that was called Arnold. So he was a big name, and Washington was up there with him for a couple of the winters. So when he did that betrayal, it was quite a betrayal.
Yeah. Well, how does that expression go? Something about betrayal never comes from an enemy or something. You've got to be close to really, for a true betrayal, it has to come from someone you trust, sort of thing.
Yes.
Yeah. And it was an important port. He tried to sell Fort Arnold, which was at West Point in New York, to the British or something.
Right there on the Hudson River, West Point, or this establishment that was called Arnold. It was right on the Hudson River. So when those boats come in from, the Atlantic, they can go right there, and you're right in the heart of, New York and all that area. Very telling that it was in the 12th house. Oh, you moved Saturn into the 1st house. Okay, so we have Saturn in the 1st house. That's going on. We have Cornwall in, what do you have, October 19th, 1781, about 2.5 years after the previous house, Cornwall surrendered to Washington, and that marked the last major fight, battle on American soil for the Revolutionary
Nice.
War.
So it's like the beginning of the end of the hostilities, I suppose,
Yes,
of the war.
yes, yes,
Nice. Nice.
exactly.
First house. And it's all about the identity, the self. And, you know, I suppose at that time, perhaps Britain recognized the US as an independent nation, perhaps. I'm not sure.
They had to surrender to somebody. So yeah,
That's a good point.
they acknowledged that we were at least a country.
Mhm.
Nice. Yeah. So that's how that was. We had done the fighting, we had done the major fighting, and that was one of the last battles happened when Saturn was in there giving us the title of you have to surrender to who? The United States. So that's part of the self. So Saturn in the second house, that's about the money. If you remember, that's what we need to how do we survive? Okay, so it's you can survive on the food and everything that you're given. You can also survive on Mercury's in there, so that has a lot to do with commerce.
Yeah, trade.
Yeah, trade. So,
and actually, look at this. It's Saturn at 23 opposite the natal Mercury there. So
yeah,
be interesting to know if that was one of the first international trades they were involved with or not.
I believe it was, or at least my sources, which was americasbesthistory.com is where I got my information. And that is when we sold cotton to the UK. They became great neighbors and trade partners. As well as allies now. So yeah, it was a tough relationship, but I'm glad we went through it. Moving on to the third house, this is kind of cool. It has to do with local travel. So we're not talking about jet planes and we're not talking about rockets. It was John Fitch demonstrated his steamboat, which is local travel.
Yeah, like along rivers, and because you've got a lot of rivers over there.
We do have a lot of rivers.
Well, you seem to. All these Great Lakes and yeah.
Well, in my neck of the woods, there are a lot of rivers and lakes. Much to you'll find out Lewis and Clark's chagrin, they did not appreciate them, but I do. So the steamboat was launched and demonstrated for local travel, and that's how it's signified in the third house on the Sibley chart.
Very important, I'm sure, because I mean there's no cars back then. Horses took a while. I suppose the steamboat was a lot faster.
But yeah, we have not only the Hudson River, but we also have the Mississippi, which runs straight through the country, north and south. So
oh wow,
plenty of opportunity for boating. So moving on to the fourth house, this is really, really cool. When we have been, we have gone through that war, we're starting to come up and trying to formulate a country. We get Saturn moves into the fourth house, and we're looking for a fatherland. We're looking for somebody who we can say our lineage is from him. And that is when we voted for George Washington, unanimously was voted in as our first president, our fatherland, which it's so cool. I mean, the symbolism is so striking.
Is he known as the father of the country or anything like that?
Yes, he is known as the father of our country. Well, the fact a lot of them, Washington, Jefferson, you know.
Oh, they're the founding fathers.
They're the founding fathers, yeah.
Nice.
Well, the 5th house has to do with pleasure. It has to do with children. It has to do the things that we create. Okay, so let's see, in my notes, it has December 15th, 1791. You don't change the thing. Is when the Bill of Rights takes effect, which was kind of something cool that we created.
That's the point. I never thought of it like that. Yeah, it's the creation of the country's kind of creed, I suppose.
Right, yeah. That everybody has rights and everybody should have free rights in this country is how it was meant to be, how it was, that was the idea of our founding fathers.
It's also very protective too, like there's, you know, the right not to incriminate yourself and to, you know, bear arms and all sorts of things, freedom of religion, I suppose, and
freedom of the press. Yeah. We also, that was in, you have February 20th, 1792, the U.S. Post Office was established. Now, if I know there's a lot of email going around, but back in the day, we had post office, we had stamps that you put on an envelope, and a lot of times you would have your artwork, or you would have your queen or your ruler, or, well, a lot of times in America, we have our artwork on our stamps, and we ship those throughout the world to show them off. So it's a great 5th house.
Yeah, that really took me by surprise. It was like, oh, you know, and then when you said about the artwork, it's like, oh, of course, you know, I mean, and like you said, it goes worldwide. It's brilliant.
Yeah. If you can stop and look at the symbolism, you can see all of these things happening, and Saturn is the same thing that's going through, going, all right, now how are we going to structure this, and how are we going to structure this, and how are we going to structure that, and how are we going to structure this? So that's kind of what we're all, you know, that's what this is trying to, that's hopefully what this is showing us.
And that Saturn's not only helping structure, but it's giving that stability and longevity for these things like the Bill of Rights. I mean, you know, it's written, what, 250 years ago or something, or maybe not quite, you know, 240 something years ago, and it's still referred to, and, you know, even us in other countries know about, you know, what is it? Something about the 5th? I'm going to invoke the 5th.
Oh,
I've heard people use that. It's like it doesn't count in this country.
That is, no, I'm going to take the 5th. That is, I'm not going to incriminate myself. That's like
I've heard people try and use
mute.
that. It's like, doesn't count in this country.
Yeah, I get to be
country.
mute. Yeah, you don't have to make me incriminate myself if I don't want to.
Yeah,
it's a fair thing. It's a good offer sometimes. So in the 6th house, it's what we do daily. So it's, you know, it could be exercise, it could be eating, it could be taking care of your health, it could be, you know, making sure your dog is fed, or, you know, your pets are fed. So it's the house of minor quadrupeds, as far as Valen says. Is that how he terms the animals that you can pick up?
I believe so, yeah. I think up to a horse or a goat. I think up to a goat, maybe.
Yeah.
Horse is the 12th, I believe.
Yes. If you can ride it, it's in the 12th house. But in the 6th house of the smaller animals and stuff like that. It also has to do with illness. And you have August 17th, 1798. Yeah,
I thought it was 1793. I've got 1793.
1793. 1793. I was reading it wrong. That was the time that we had an epidemic, lost 5,000 people along the docks of Philadelphia due to a mosquito-borne illness
Mhm.
on the docks.
Yeah, yellow fever, I believe. Yeah.
5,000 people back in 1793.
That's a lot of people. Yeah.
It is a lot of people. Definitely. The sixth house is illnesses tend to crop up in the sixth house. And if you don't take care of them, they end up messing with you in the 12th house, is what I was told.
Yeah, I could see how that'd be. Or I was thinking, you know, if you don't pay attention, you'll end up on the 8th
Yeah.
with the death. So
yeah. So moving on to August 3rd, 1795, General Wayne signs a treaty at Fort Greenfield or Greenville in Ohio with Indians in an attempt to try to make peace with the other, if it's Americans here in the first house, it's the people who are living right with us would be the indigenous people, and they're represented in the 7th house, and that's when we did a treaty with them.
Very close to that descendant too at the time.
Yeah.
The natal descendant of the United States.
Just about coming up on it. Yeah. Very close. Yeah. Also, we did sign a treaty in Madrid. Establishing colonies, Spanish colonies in our area.
And you got your 8th house.
Then we have the 8th house. So with Saturn sitting right there, we have Congress had ordered the U.S. Navy to capture 84 armed French ships because they were raiding the United States ships. The 8th house has to do with death, other people's money, maybe even pirating. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm going to look up, I'm going to find out what pirating comes under.
Yeah. I would say
I've got a book here that has a lot of things. I'm going to look that up.
It has to do with other people's money, I would suspect.
Well,
banks are
actually Saturn works perfectly because Saturn is related to ships and that. So yeah, I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Saturn has a lot of structure to it. Yeah. Which is kind of cool. I've had to become comfortable with Saturn. It resides in my 10th house. So
yeah.
I've had
not the most fun planet, is it?
Yeah, it definitely is eye-opening. So the next house is my favorite house of all. This is the house of higher education. It is the house of courts and law, your values. And so you have April 24th, 1800, the Library of Congress. So that's higher learning. The Library of Congress was formed. I like how the North Node is there, which is just, it gives you a lot. The 9th house also has a lot to do with with courts. And January 20th, 1801, John Marshall was appointed the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. So Saturn in that house had a lot to do with that higher education, where our values are, the court system, that type of thing.
Yeah. The rule of law.
Yeah. So moving on to the 10th house, which has to do with what you're known for. Could be work related, but in the 10th house, when Saturn got into the Sibley chart for the 10th house for the United States, New York, the New York Post was published in 1801. July 4th, 1802, West Point opens. So the property that Benedict Arnold tried selling off to our enemies was renamed to get the Arnold name off of that area of land, and it was named West Point. And that is where our military seems to come from.
Yeah, very famous.
Military school there.
Even overseas countries are aware of, West Point. It's, where your elite kind of military train, so academy.
Yeah. Yep. And then yeah.
Was there another one for the 10th? Oh, yes, the Louisiana Purchase.
Oh, the Louisiana Purchase. Thomas Jefferson doubled the size of the United States for the Louisiana Purchase in April 30th, 1803. And then I believe on the 11th house, when Saturn goes to there, we're back with Lewis and Clark goes exploring the western part of the United States. Those are the hopes and dreams coming back again. Yeah, Lewis and Clark was not a fan of Michigan. They wrote in their journals that Michigan was full of bugs, and uninhabitable due to the mosquitoes. So we've come to live with them. It's the state that I'm from. It says hi to the world. So I like Michigan. I'm a fan of Michigan. Lewis and Clark aren't, but I
imagine anywhere that an explorer went that had a lot of water would have that issue. I would have thought.
Well, Michigan is known, I think, within every 4 or 7 miles, you're within, you're next to a creek, either a creek or some kind of body of water with Michigan. So we have a lot.
Okay.
So yeah, I think that's why the mosquitoes were so bad. I think
maybe they were having a bad week.
Maybe they were. But yeah, that is and then we're back to the 12th when, oh yeah, I forgot, in 1801 Thomas Jefferson proposed all slavery to be prohibited, and was defeated by just 1 vote, and that would have been put in the 9th house. So
1801.
In 1801, that was when Thomas Jefferson wanted to get rid of slavery and was defeated. We ended up, if you can put yeah, just at the tail end.
Yeah, if it was earlier in the year, it would have been the 9th house. Yeah.
Yeah. In 1808, so where is Saturn in 1808? Can you possibly move that to 1808? It's the house of finishing and endings, and Congress makes it illegal to import slaves to take effect January 1st, 1808. Yeah, the philosophical change originally started in 1801 and finally ended up, it took us 2, 4, 6, 8 years to have it actually illegal to import slaves into this country. Yeah. So from 1808, when it became illegal, for 60 some odd years, I'm thinking it was not very legal to be importing slaves. But yeah, that's how the country started, how we evolved and developed, and hopefully you have learned something about the houses, a little bit about the American history.
Really interesting. I was just wanted to have a look here when the Constitution was drawn up too. I think we forgot to mention it, but Saturn was here in the third, but Neptune, which is very idealistic, was sitting right on the natal Saturn. I like that, in the 11th house of hopes and dreams and ideals. And that when at what we would call the natal chart of the USA, that Saturn is in the 11th house of hopes and dreams. And yeah, and that Saturn is very strong in that natal chart, as it's in Libra, so it's exalted.
Yes, it wants to be fair. That's the scales of Libra, kind of.
Well, that was very interesting, Miss Donna.
I thought it was interesting. I absolutely love doing it. I'm not a big fan of history, but I do like a little bit of history. I think it shows everybody the houses, which is leads to easier conversations when you go, oh, you've got something going on in your, in your house, and they'll like, well, what house are you looking at? I'm looking at the 4th house, so I think if it opens up the conversation for people to at least know what the houses are. I look forward to doing other little views into how the other techniques work, of like zodiacal releasing, solar returns, progress charts. I hope to be able to do those as soon as whenever we can.
Yeah, it's always just finding time, isn't it? But we're going to put a link to Donna's article on the in the description, because it's a great article and it goes into more detail, and you can look at the charts there. And also I might put in the description as well just a rough guide of what all the houses mean, just for a normal natal chart. So yeah. And where can people find you, Donna?
You can email me at donnabarconsulting@gmail.com, or you can get to my website, which is donnabastrology.com, and there's contact information there.
And you're available for readings?
I am available for readings. I do layouts, crystal layouts as well. Did you want to talk about Saturn stone?
Oh yes, that's a good idea. Yes.
All right. You can wear stones. This is an onyx. Onyx looks like this. It's a black stone. Saturn is always tends to be black.
Dark. Yeah.
It is the darker of the stones. And I would say that they're okay stones. They're good to have around every once in a while. You don't want to have 6 of these in your pockets. A lot of people ask me about stones. You don't want to have 6 of these in your pockets and walk around with them all day. If you do, you're not going to feel light and springy, and you're going to feel down and dark. That's what these do. But having these if you have these in your possession, and you're working with them, they help you to stick with whatever you say you're going to do.
It does sound very Saturn-like, doesn't it? It's that stability and that reliability. I'm just thinking, if you're feeling really flighty, it would be really good to have that on you. But like you said, too much, because Saturn is kind of a little bit depressing.
Yes,
it's kind of a downer.
It can pull you
and a little bit goes a long way.
Yes, it can pull you down. I've known people who have said, oh, if one is working good, I'll have 5. And then they walk around with them, and then 3 weeks later they're going, I feel so bad, and it's like, well, what are you doing? And it's like, what kind of stones do you have? And they were like, well, that onyx made me, or a black stone made me feel real good. I wanted to do more of them, and so I stuck them in my pockets. And I'm like, no, you don't want to do that. One is okay. Overdosing on stones isn't going to make you feel good. One is not better.
The warning label.
10 is. I'm sorry, what?
They need to come with a warning label.
They do. 10 is not better than 1.
Yeah.
So just kind of keep
Moderation
that
in all
in
things.
memory. Yeah. Yeah. As my grandmother said, moderation in everything.
Mm-hmm.
So where can people get a hold of you now that I'm done with the Saturn stuff?
I am at Scallywag Astrology. I'm on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. My website is astrology.scallywag.com. And yeah, I'm available for readings. So yeah.
Great. That sounds great. And I can hardly wait to
Yeah,
do
well, I
another
think
segment.
recording tomorrow night to do the new moon for Pisces.
Yeah.
Yeah, that will be good. And then we're going to have to do the Aries ingress charts soon too, which will be very interesting because we'll be looking at the charts for the US, Australia, Canada, and maybe the UK.
Yeah.
And that'll be here before we know it.
That should be great. I look forward to it.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.